Hey folks, quick note before the show. This conversation gets into some sensitive issues, including the mention of sexual assault, and there's some adult language. If you're around young ears, you might consider firing up this episode later. Today on CityCast Madison. What do you picture when you hear the word woodworker? Okay, do you have someone in mind? Are they a cisgender male with a mustache and or beard? Someone who resembles Paul Bunyan or Ron Swanson? Well, that image is a stereotype that one local woodworker hopes to change. Sylvie Rosenthal is a professional woodworker with over 2 decades of experience, who's repeatedly found her identities as a queer woman stigmatized over her career. In response, she started Lower Astronomy Studios in Madison to be a safe haven for her work and other marginalized folks looking to break into the industry. We sat down with Sylvie to talk about Lower Astronomy Studios and her personal experiences in the trade. It's Wednesday, July 24th. I'm Bianca Martin, and here's what Madison's talking about. Hey, Sylvie.
Hey, Bianca.
So I am super stoked to talk to you. You are a creative genius. Thank you for giving us your time.
Oh, thank you.
And so tell us, what is Lower Astronomy Studios and how did it come to be?
So Lower Astronomy Studios is the name of my studio and workshop here in Madison, Wisconsin. And we are a wood studio. So we make furniture on commission and interior architectural millwork, things like doors, things for the interior of the home. And also we have a small line of home decor. We also make sculpture for national exhibition. And I have some people who help me in the studio. So myself being assigned female at birth and being in the woodworking world has been not always the easiest, where your physicality, your embodiedness may not always feel safe. So I am very aware of that. So I hire only femme and other gender nonconforming and anybody who would have a marginalized identity. So basically, if you're like a cis white guy, especially if you have a beard and a flannel shirt, you're going to get like more clout walking through the door than I will with my over 20 years of experience. So we just try to have a different vibe in the shop.
Well, you definitely described several woodworkers I know in the Madison area with the beard and the flannel. But there are other looks. There are other, positionalities in this world. One thing that I saw that was really exciting is you have something called like an educational laboratory. And it's because you take on kind of like creative projects and things that kind of need some tinkering. Can you tell us like an example of something that you've been working on recently that would fall into that category?
Yeah. So the educational laboratory is one way to describe like design thinking in thinking with and through material. But I like to think of it as a laboratory because sometimes I think I should have a lab coat because we operate like a scientist, right? Like I know what I'm dealing with and I have a hypothesis and I test it. Right. So one project I did for a local textile artist, Marianne Fairbanks, is she wanted some wooden arms to replace the old plastic arms on an old aluminum folding chair. And she had about 10 ones that she'd all found on the curb, and they all have slightly different geometries. Right. So I want to try to design one object that can fit on multiple pieces. So figuring out the geometries and how these pieces work and collapse and the way that they work in terms of tension and compression and how the wood would have to perform in tension and compression, and then how to get it to fold, how to assemble it, and how to do it in the most reasonable way possible for 10 different chairs. So it was really fun. And it's also really fun to come up against or think with a really, truly well-designed object like an aluminum folding chair. I have a whole different level of appreciation for them as objects.
Can folks see your art out and about?
Yeah, so people can see my work in a couple of different ways. I have 2 different websites. I have one that is my name. Yeah, fancy. So one is sylvierosenthal.com. And the other one is lowerastronomystudios.com. And the Lower Astronomy Studios is a newer website. I'm going to have a show in town, a little 2-day pop-up show later this summer in August at the R&D Gallery, a great little spot that's just been started to bring some alternative spaces to Madison. So
Ooh.
I think it's like one of the last weekends in August.
Oh, nice. Something I've seen is you've talked a lot about the importance of queer and femme representation in an industry that's historically been so male dominated. What have your experiences been like working in this male dominated field? And do you have examples of times where you felt like, great, I'm being further marginalized just for who I am?
I've been teaching for 20 years, both children and adults at universities, colleges, and like these regional craft schools. And for a long time, the students were older white men. And it's challenging for them to take direction from someone who looks like me. But I think it's important for them to learn and to see. And I've also had really great experiences with people who take me and my skills seriously, because I'm like, let's just show up, right? Like, I'll cut dovetails in circles around you and I will like overperform, but that is also exhausting. Like, I'm sort of done with that attitude, because why should I have to do that to be taken seriously? So it's a balance. I think that I tried to like overdo it in certain areas, like coming through college, that was, I went to, in the early 2000s, I went through woodworking undergraduate degree. Like, I have a degree in woodworking and furniture design from the School for American Crafts at the Rochester Institute of Technology. And I was one of 1 or 2 assigned female at birth people in that program. You could say some things in critiques that were like homophobic AF, and like being the only like queer person, also the only person embodied like me, it could be really hard. I mean, that was also the time when people were like, oh my God, that's so gay. And you're like, do I have to explain this to every single person why you shouldn't use that, why it's offensive to use that word like that? And I had a spiel. I would just like lose it on people, that it was like, you're using a word that I take as a sense of pride and identity, and you're turning it into a pejorative. Like, why? Why are you doing that? Like, do you understand the implication? And people just didn't get it,
And then I feel like, when you're working in your craft too, it's another place you want to take pride. So it's like a double hit if you're being
right. And you want to feel safe in your studio, right? Like, that was a place of learning, like it also, I was sexually assaulted by a classmate and didn't feel that I could tell my in between my junior and senior year. And it was again, early
before
2000s.
Yeah.
Before Me Too, and any repercussions would have been on me, not on him, because it would have been taken that I couldn't handle it, right? Or I didn't say anything because it was like, I put myself in that position by being alone with that person who I had used words with, but they didn't want to hear my words, right? And some of these experiences are really why I'm like, no, these spaces need to be a place where I can be myself, and I need my studio to be a safe space for me. And I also I feel like I'm a cooperative person. I feel like I'm an asset to my community. Why don't I have a co-op shop? And I'm like, that it's because of my own personal story that I don't have a co-op shop. And I'm okay with that.
Well, you're taking self-care. You're making that space for you. You are someone in the community that deserves protection. So that is a caring space to make that choice.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm David Plotz, the CEO of CityCast. The best way to learn a language is immersion, living where the language is spoken and using it every day. That's how I learned French as a kid. But if that's not in the cards for you this year, you can still learn a language the second best way, and that's with Babbel. I live in a city with a huge immigrant population. You probably do too. And in my hometown, a lot of my new neighbors speak Spanish as a first language, and we have lots of great Mexican and Central American and South American restaurants and stores. I wanted to be able to communicate just a little bit better with some of my neighbors. So I started with Babbel, the science-backed language learning app that actually works. And after just a few extremely enjoyable weeks learning Spanish with Babbel, I've already gotten comfortable ordering at a restaurant and eavesdropping on my girlfriend's conversations with her mom. Look, learning a language isn't always easy, but with Babbel it is fun and it feels useful, basically immediately. That's why Babbel has over 16 million subscriptions sold. Plus, all of Babbel's 14 award-winning language courses are backed by their 20-day money-back guarantee. Here's a special limited-time deal for CityCast listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/citycast. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/citycast. Spelled BABBEL.com/citycast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
I do wonder, working alongside, people who might not really understand your identity or just not care to, that sort of thing. Is there any other tools that you use? Like, I feel like you're a funny person. Like, was humor a part of the scenario? Sometimes, I assume people underestimated you.
Yeah, I do use humor. That part of my spiel is most people think in woodworking that they assume that you'll be a dude. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I just I wasn't there in, when they were passing out dicks before I was born. And I just missed it for some reason. And I don't know why I can do woodworking. I know I'm amazed too that I can use a saw and I don't have a dick. It's fucking shocking, right? Who knew? But I can do it. So if anybody really knows how you use it, what you use it for, I'm all ears because I am so curious, and I just go on a little rant about it because to make it seem as ridiculous, it's just the gender and toys, for kids. You're really?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you just have to laugh and you have to,
yeah.
And it also is one thing that people will listen to because it's a safer way to receive truth is in a joke. Mm-hmm. It's it feels a little safer because it's yeah, I'm ribbing you right now, but also you deserve it and it's cool.
Yeah. I mean, every time I call the lumber store, one of the bigger ones in town, they let me know how wood is sold every time. And I wonder if I was excuse me, how much is poplar a board foot? I would get a different answer. And I went to another one out of town because I needed a ton of very specific, I was very specific about what I needed. And I thought I was being punked by this other customer. I'm on a mission, getting boards of 8-quarter maple, which is 2-inch thick maple. I need it really, really true, really blonde. And I'm just going through them. And he comes up and he's you really know, you look like you know what you're doing. And I was uh-huh, I do. And it was just whoa. So how do you learn? I was I'm a professional. This is what I do, And then he was huh, where's your husband? I was I'm not married. Or he's your husband's a lucky guy or something. I was I'm gay. And he was well, that's all right with me. I was not asking for your approval. It was he hit every mark.
Every limb of the tree as he was falling out of it.
And then he was oh yeah, so I'm working. And he's oh, do you have a website? I was yeah, if you get a piece of paper, I'll write it, you can write it down. I'll spell it out for you. And he's will you write it down for me? And I was no. And he comes back with a pen and paper and is will you write it down for me? And I was no, I will spell it for you.
Yeah. The teaching skills are coming out because
my God.
Let's try this again. I'm not here to serve you, but you are asking a lot of me over and over again. Right? All right. Yeah.
Right? I was like, oh man, do you just need a friend? Like,
maybe that is what was happening.
like I know he meant well, but
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of friends, I wanted to ask about the woodworking community in Madison. And like, is there a community of woodworkers? And is there like a queer community? Because I actually, funny enough, I feel like I have experienced woodworking in Madison like only with lesbians. So
that's great. I mean, yeah, you know, there are a lot. I know a couple of other queer woodworkers. I know more like tradies. The construction and remodeling program in Madison at MATC and their cabinetry program are both like stellar operations that have worked really hard to be inclusive to anybody who's been marginalized, you know, anybody who's not mainstream in the trades. And there's been a sweet little crew of tradies, and we meet up once a month, and it's a lot of camaraderie. But there are far more white cis male woodworkers in Madison, but there's a good crew of queers and assigned female at birth people and other marginalized folks. You know, like Madison is very white also. So my studio would love to bring in BIPOC people, but I feel like Madison isn't as diverse as other cities. So I just try to say that. I don't know if I'm saying if it's coming out of my mouth well or not, but it's something that I feel like needs to be acknowledged.
Yeah, definitely. I brought that up because I'm pretty sure you actually might know my friends that I'm talking about, but they all lived in a house. I don't know, they're not there anymore, but the house of the boyfriends, and they were just like they were just baddies, and they're like, "Oh, we got you don't let me take you to Home Depot, Bianca. We got this." And they were just like, I was like, "Oh, there's a whole community around, you know, queer folks getting together and like handling their house stuff." And we just talked to the trans handyman, Mercury Stardust, on the show, and that was like one of my favorite conversations I've ever had. I thought there might be a real community around this.
Yeah, and I think there is, and you know, with like Mercury Stardust and like the House of Boyfriends and like with this tradies group, I also think I've thought a lot, and I'm interested in like running workshops like out of my studio for the community. It's something I'm interested in. Right now I teach with and through the public library, through the Bubbler, for kids and adults. Ooh. The library is doing some awesome care and repair classes in the fall, and I'm going to be teaching 2 different workshops a couple times at some different libraries. One is simple wooden chair repair, and another super basic class about how to use a drill. Because I think that sometimes people forget that like even that can be a hurdle.
Guilty.
And can be really frustrating. So these are going to be like super approachable, but it's also like who you let in your house and who you let in your space to repair, and how you're talked to in your own space is so important, right? And it's something I've wanted to do for a while. I haven't like landed the plane on it.
Well, I saw that you're hosting a class in partnership with Arts and Literature Laboratory this August. So you're teaching kids about woodworking, and it looks like it's already filled up. So that's cool.
It's going to be really fun. I grew up teaching kids. So I was apprenticed at like age 9 to the director of a hands-on design education museum on the East Coast.
So you were like born for this.
I got my first drill and jigsaw at age 10. I don't have a handy parents. So, you know, by the time I was tiny, it was like my job to look at everything to try to fix it in the house. But, you know, my mentor there was like brilliant and also like mercurial and handsy, which also like problematic. So I learned,
my goodness.
Yeah. I learned a lot of good lessons.
Handy. You said handsy. Jeez,
handsy.
Louise.
Handsy. You know, I learned some really good lessons in some really shitty ways. And I am like, it's unfortunate in its preparation because I have been bitched out by an angry white dude with an eye patch more times than I could care to remember. And I've seen the underside of the eye patch, and like, Sometimes I did it. I was like feral in a place with tools, like we did a lot of stuff, but we were kids, and I worked there till I was 17. All to say, I grew up teaching kids, and there's like a certain pitch of controlled mayhem that I love. And I love seeing, like, I have a little video of like teaching this little 4-year-old how to use a drill. And I swear she's so giddy. She almost like high fives herself. She almost like falls over backwards that you're like, and then I taught this pod of kids. This really lovely. It was like one of the best things of COVID. I had a pod of kids like once a week in the shop. And this little 4-year-old, her siblings, she sort of like came in when her brother sort of was tired of being around all the girls. And then after I showed her how to use the drill, anytime I got the drill, like later on from across the room, she'd be like, Sylvie, do you need help with that? Be like, amazing. She's
already empowered.
Help. Oh my God. So empowered that it's just, it makes you see the world differently, I think.
Well, I have to say, I'm so sorry to hear about all of the wholly negative experiences that you had just because of who you are in this space. But it's so heartening to see you still in it, doing what you love and teaching other people. Do you think it seems like you will be able to change standards in the woodworking industry from your little corner of the world? Do you see it, or are you trying to be a disruptive force in any sense with LAS as you trot ahead in your endeavors?
I would like to be. I have to say, like, I am so proud of the youth for like not taking shit. Like, I can't wait for them to be 18 and I'll be able to vote. Come on. It's not fast enough. But right, like the field is changing. And there's a lot of other people who are, I would say, like 10 years younger than me who are just like, kicking ass. Like, I get exhausted a lot of time. Like, I'm just like, come on. I get, like I can be energized and I can also be like, this is exhausting, or get like jaded about something. But I do feel that I have national like comrades, which is really, really lovely. And there's a lot of great organizations that have come up nationally, regionally, like our little tradies group is lovely. There's an organization, for craft called Crafting the Future, is based in LA, started by some friends of mine, and they do scholarships and residencies for marginalized people in crafts, getting them to craft schools. There's another organization called the Chairmakers Toolbox that helps give scholarships to people who are underrepresented in the field of woodworking, and chair makers who are retired, or have passed, if their tools are donated and they redistribute them. There's
Beautiful.
Like Girls Garage in LA, and there's a really cool program that I just learned about in Fitchburg that like they're training kids and girls. MATC, my friend Sandy Thistle, who's one of the heads of that program, the construction and remodeling program. They run a camp build with the Girl Scouts. Like, there's so many like regional and national.
It's happening.
Yeah, it's happening. And it's really, it's really great. And when like I used to teach one of like the tool-based, shop-based intro class to the construction and remodeling in the construction and remodeling program. And I think it's important for those kids, there's a lot of kids, but there's also a lot of they have a wide demographic of people. And I think it's important for them to learn. I think people who are marginalized, it's nicer for them to have an instructor who's also not of like shop dominance,
Yeah, to see what's possible. So I think, there's still a lot of humps to get over, but there's been some really lovely change. Well, Sylvie, it's been absolutely lovely talking to you and hearing about your work and your stories. We're so grateful for you coming on to CityCast Madison. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here.
That's Sylvie Rosenthal, owner of Lower Astronomy Studios. If you want to check out her work, head to our show notes for a link. That's all for today, here on CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin. If you enjoyed this show, why not share this episode with a friend who loves to tinker and build? We'll be back tomorrow morning with more stories from around the city. Until then, take good care.